All right, everybody, how we doing today? Today is June 24th. It is Wednesday, June 24th. Yesterday was Tuesday. Um, so a couple big stories today that were coming in that I want to talk about. So first and foremostly, so Polymarket, and they're in a bit of promotional trouble per se, or to say. So a Wall Street investigation, what was published over the weekend, found that Polymarket, the prediction market platform you've seen all over TikTok, paid dozens of mostly college age creators to film fake bets on copycat versions of its website. And over 1,105 videos were reviewed and 1.9 million were displayed in winnings. Zero of these were real trades on the websites. And these fake sites were built to look identical to the actual platform. And this is the second time where Polymarket, this is actually the second Polymarket scandal, marketing scandal from this month. And their first was their CMO paying 2.5 million through a personal PayPal account to undisclosed influencers. And Polymarket is saying it's auditing, but regulators haven't acted yet, and we're going to go deep on why later. And in the midterm battlefield, we are 133 days out from November from election day, and the 2026 midterms are 133 days away. And Democrats need 4 seats in 4 Senate seats and 3 House seats to flip both chambers. And the generic ballot is showing Democrats with a meaningful national advantage, anywhere from D+3 to D+11, depending on the pollster you're looking at. And the Senate battle is going to come down to 8 key states, and candidate controversies on both sides are in the wild card. And we're going to full breakdown in this later. This is the most comprehensive midterm update we've done so far. And another story coming in today is that courts are greenlighting the fast-track deportations nationwide. And a federal appeals court today ruled that the Trump administration can resume expedited deportations of undocumented migrants across the entire country, not just near the border. And this is a significant expansion of enforcement authority of deportations that required previously a fuller hearing process, and now they can be fast-tracked nationally. More on that later. And going back to midterm primaries, in New York, Mamdani's progressives win safe seats and moderates win competitive ones. So New York held primary elections yesterday. New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani backed 3 progressive candidates, and all 3 won. But the results told a more complicated story for the Democratic Party's direction. Progressives dominated safe seats, while moderates prevailed in competitive ones. It is a preview of the broader strategic debate Democrats are facing heading into November. And headline number 5, Messi breaks the all-time World Cup scoring record. At the 2026 FIFA World Cup, Lionel Messi scored his 17th World Cup goal against Austria, now becoming the all-time men's scoring leader. And then he immediately scored on an 18th. He is now the all-time leader across both men and women's World Cup tournaments combined. And we'll have a bit short close on that later, but it's worth to know. So, with that being said, let's talk about Polymarket and all the trouble they're in right now. So, as I mentioned previously, this Polymarket story is going to have 2 layers that are going to be worth separating. So for layer 1, what exactly happened here and what these documents are showing. And layer 2, the regulatory response is almost certain to be nothing. And for that reason, that second part is really interesting. So I want to start with what the Wall Street Journal actually found. So with that being said, let's get straight into it. So here we are looking at CBS News. CBS News's investigation summary from the Wall Street Journal. So Polymarket told CBS News that it is auditing its promotional content after a Wall Street Journal investigation found the prediction market paid online content creators to produce videos that the newspaper said falsely showed customers winning a total of 1.9 million. So what Polymarket is, and let me just pull it up really quick. So Polymarket is a prediction market. It is a platform where you can bet real money on the outcomes of future events. And this can range to just about anything, to be honest. You can trade, so for example here, the outcome of the Switzerland versus Canada game on the World Cup. You can trade, or I guess you can say bet here, on whether Bitcoin is going to be up or down 5 million, or you know, when the U.S.-Iran final nuclear deal, by when, more games, whatever this is. So this is the kind of thing. And it's not just sports, obviously. It's elections, geopolitical events, economic data, breaking news. You bet on whether something will happen, and the market price reflects what the crowd thinks that probability is. For example, if you just take a look at this one here, we have Republican presidential nominee for 2028. We can see the two percentages here, and these people are trading on whether or not the likelihood it is to happen. So you can see that these prediction market traders are all predicting that JD Vance, for example, has a 38% chance of running as the Republican presidential nominee in 2028. And how this all actually works is that it operates on the Polygon blockchain and it settles in the USDC, which is a dollar peg stablecoin, and every single real trade is publicly audible on chain. That transparency and verifiability is literally the company's core pitch. Their thing is being, quote, "We are a truth machine, the market doesn't lie." And actually, per PYMNTS, which is Polymarket's main competitor, Kalshi, has actually annualized revenue since November to $2 billion, and Kalshi is actually in talks with banks about going public, and that's not going to be expected until late 2027 or late 2028. And Polymarket's valuation so far is actually at about $9 billion. And an important detail I need to mention here is that Polymarket's actually been banned from operating in the United States since 2022, when it settled allegations from the CFTC that it was running an unregistered options exchange, and it paid a fine and it agreed to block US users. And then last year, the CFTC actually granted Polymarket permission to launch a US regulated platform. But if we come back here, per CBS News, the service is invite only. And I actually remember when this all happened because I used to follow this fellow on TikTok who used to just do like sports, like sports commentary, sports summaries from all the games that recently happened. I forgot what his name was originally, but he eventually became a partner, or basically an entire. He just promotes Polymarket now essentially. So he does the same thing, but it's just Polymarket. And I remember when I heard about Polymarket, I was actually very interested because I like sports. So I remember I actually got on the list to get an invite, and only recently, as of like maybe 6 months ago, I actually got into Polymarket. Of course, I've never actually used Polymarket because I'm not personally a big gambling guy, but it's a very interesting platform for sure. And yeah, so per CBS News, obviously, and all this other information is that the service is invite only. It's only accessible on an iPhone, and the bulk of Polymarket's trading remains on its offshore exchange. So what we're actually looking at here is a $9 billion company that's legally banned from its largest potential market with a competitor closing in. And this context is going to be very important for understanding why this marketing campaign happened. So if I'm going to pull up this, and it's going to tell us a lot more about what this investigation is going to actually mean here. So obviously, Polymarket has been accused of using these fake winning bets to fuel its viral growth. And so, obviously, the Wall Street Journal reviewed 1,105 videos posted by 10 promoted creators between December of 2025 and mid-May of 2026. And we can see some of the things they found. So a specific example from here is one clip illustrated the depth of the deception in stark terms. The report highlighted college student George Makihara, who posted a January video claiming to have earned $100,000 profit from a wager that President Donald Trump would mention McDonald's during the month. The clip relied on footage of Trump saying the word 2 months earlier, making the wager impossible to win under the market's actual rules. More than 50 real users reportedly placed the same bet in January and all lost. So Polymarket built near perfect replica websites of its own platform designed to be indistinguishable from the real thing. One example that was actually cited by the Wall Street Journal was a website called POYmarket.com. That's POYmarket.com, or POIY market.com, using a capital letter I that looks like a lowercase l, making it visually identical to polymarket.com at a glance. And a lot of these creators were paid $2,000 to $3,000 a month to film themselves making these trades on these fake sites. And these trades never actually happened on the real platform. Creators were being explicitly instructed to not disclose that they were being paid by Polymarket. And as we see here, creators were paid about $2,000 to $3,000 not to disclose these arrangements. Some added at Polymarket Partners to their bios only after the paper started asking questions. And the firm worked closely with a hired marketing contractor to promote these sites. And the marketing firm actually is called Virality, and they managed this network of clippers and paid them only when at least 60% of their audience was based in the US, and the clips drew more than 140 million views across TikTok, YouTube, Instagram per analytics provider Tubular. And as we see here, this reach was no accident. The campaign targeted American users despite Polymarket being legally prohibited from serving them. And of these 1,105 videos that were reviewed, approximately 70% showed someone placing a bet. But of course, none of those bets were real. And 118 videos showed creators reacting to wins, celebrating roughly 900,000 in fabricated profits. On the real market, these same bets would have lost more than $166,000. So the total displayed value across all videos that I mentioned before was 1.9 million in all of these fake winnings. And these videos collectively drew more than 140 million views across TikTok, as we mentioned before. And the disclosure scandal that actually happened before this one was back on June 5th, so not all too long ago. So, and this is from Politico, by the way. Polymarket's chief marketing officer, his name is Matthew Maudaber, and he used his personal PayPal account to pay content creators who promoted Polymarket odds on X. Without labeling these posts as paid advertisements, his account sent more than 2.5 million over to 800 people. Federal advertising law requires the disclosure of paid endorsements, and none of these were disclosed. And per the IB Times UK, some creators only added Polymarket Partner to their bios after the journalists began asking questions, as we said. And another important thing we can flag here is that streamer Aiden Ross has multi-million-dollar contracts with Polymarket per the Wall Street Journal, and Polymarket paid these influencers to promote at least 19 videos discussing insider trading, even while these investigations were ongoing. And that's almost a remarkable specific detail that's just in the story right here. And the irony at heart of this scandal right here, and this is the part that makes the story genuinely interesting beyond just accompanied bad marketing. So Polymarket's entire value proposition is that the thing that they make is different from every other betting platform, is a radical transparency, and on-chain verifiability. Every real trade on Polymarket is going to run on the Polygon blockchain, and every position is public, and anyone can audit any transaction. That market oracle can be disputed by anyone posting a $750 bond. Nothing is hidden. And that's their pitch. And this is why people trust Polymarket odds on election, on the Iran deal, and everything else. And their growth strategy operated entirely in the shadows, on the fake sites, with undisclosed payments, using footage that misrepresented real-world events, specifically targeting a market they are legally prohibited from serving. And also from these people over here at the NFT Plazas, quote, a platform built on the promise that prices reveal what the crowd truly believes has to prove that the market underneath was cleaner than the campaign that sold it, end quote. And obviously, there was another college student who was also a creator named Razine Khan, who worked with Polymarket until March, compared the approach to fast food commercials that make burgers look better than they are. You know, when they dress up the burgers with the makeup, they'll put in like little foam makeup pieces to make it look nice and voluptuous and juicy and lovely. And he said, quote, we are depicting what actually happens, end quote, and that defense is not going to satisfy regulators at all if regulators do decide to act. And here's the thing. Regulators are probably not going to act on this. And here's why. So there's a piece by Fortune that actually kind of goes in between. There's a bit of a connection here with the Trump family and the CFTC. So if we want to take a look at that, we will actually learn a few interesting things about why regulators might not even do anything. So, Polymarket allegedly fake trades. Chances are slim that Trump administration will investigate, according to this sports betting attorney that collaborated with Fortune on this one here. So the two regulators that can or would act are the FTC, the Federal Trade Commission, because federal law requires that paid endorsements are disclosed, and the FTC has explicit authority over deceptive advertising. FTC spokesperson to CBS News declined to comment on whether they planned to investigate. And the CFTC, which is the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, they oversee prediction markets. They also have prior enforcement history with Polymarket, the 2022 settlement that we talked about before, and the CFTC spokesperson did not respond at all to requests for comments. And this is why experts are going to say enforcement is unlikely. And obviously, there's this Fortune article that is citing the gaming attorney Daniel Wallach of the Wallach legal firm. He said, quote, that the CFTC has moved away from enforcement priority and is now marching in lockstep with the prediction market exchanges, end quote. He also said, quote, I am skeptical that there will be any real consequences coming from this agency that only has one commissioner out of 5 and has experienced a 25% reduction in staff over the past year, end quote. And now remember, guys, all of these source links are in the description. So if you're ever curious about where I'm getting some of this information, every single article or every single primary source that I pull from is always going to be in the description. So if you get curious about something, it's all under there. Go check it out. So the Trump family connections, these are confirmed facts, by the way, reported by Fortune and IB Times. So Donald Trump Jr., who is Donald Trump's eldest son, is a paid advisor to Kalshi, Polymarket's main competitor and a major investor in Polymarket through the venture capital firm 1789 Capital, where he is a partner. And this means that the president's son has financial ties to both of the two major prediction market platforms. And of course, the CFTC, which oversees both platforms, is significantly reduced in staffing, excuse me, and has deprioritized enforcement against prediction markets under these current administrations. And it's also worth noting that there were 2 separate insider trading issues at Polymarket. So back in May of 2026, federal prosecutors alleged a Google software engineer made more than $1.2 million on Polymarket using confidential business information, essentially betting on outcomes he knew about before the public did. He is facing money laundering charges on this one. And of course, I'm sure we're all familiar with insider trading. It happens. It's actually a little bit common in our own government, where we can see certain politicians will make trades right before specific things happen. And obviously, insider trading, regardless of who is doing it, is pretty bad. Whether it's an average trader who knows something he shouldn't, or if it's our government officials, it's all bad. Dishonesty is always bad. And separately, IB Times UK flagged that 9 anonymous accounts won 98% of their Iran war bets on Polymarket, netting them $2.4 million, million with an M, a pattern that the platform has not explained publicly that raised insider trading concerns. And this gaming attorney, Wallach, right here, his conclusion on the likely outcome of this fake ad scandal, he said, quote, the most likely legal fallout would come from private civil suits brought by bettors who lost money after relying on Polymarket's misleading marketing, end quote. And this is all documented fact. And of course, just because there are connections with the Trumps and all of them, that does not mean that they won't do anything. It's just something to keep in mind. And sort of, these are just facts, right, guys? So that's the whole story on Polymarket. Now, let's shift gears to something with a bit more of a harder deadline, which is November 4th, 133 days away, the midterm battlefield. So we are 133 days from November 4th, and I want to give you guys the full picture on where this thing's going to stand. The map, the key races, and all these candidate controversies that could decide everything. So we're going to begin with these numbers right here. So looking here, we will have the 270 to win Senate forecast map. Oh. There we go. Much better. So these maps are obviously just reflect a number of quantitative and qualitative forecasters, as well as some consensus projections. And we want to look at the consensus forecast right here. So what we're looking at is that Republicans are going to be holding 53 Senate seats, while Democrats hold 47, which include two independents who caucus with them, Bernie Sanders of Vermont and Angus King of Maine, neither of whom have their seats up in 2026 in November. And in the House, Republicans hold a narrow majority, and Democrats are going to need a net gain of just 3 seats to flip the House. So all the seats at stake here, there are 35 Senate seats up in 2026, including special elections of Florida and Ohio. Of these 35, 23 are going to be held by Republicans and 12 by Democrats. And if we're looking here, we're going to have a couple toss-up states. So we have, right here, we have Maryland, Michigan, Ohio, and I think that's it for the toss-up states. And most of these are, so we got Colorado's going to be safe Democrat, safe Democrat, safe Democrat, lean red, all sorts of very basic stuff. And what Democrats are going to need to actually take the Senate here, they need to get seen a net gain of 4 seats, meaning they must hold every seat they currently have and flip 4 Republican-held seats. So this is not easy at all. Democrats are defending seats in state Trump won in 2024, like Georgia and Michigan, and their best offensive opportunities are in Maine, North Carolina, Ohio, Alaska, and Texas, and Iowa. And what the history says right here is that the party in the White House almost always loses seats in midterm elections. This is one of the most reliable patterns in American political history. And with the Iran war and its economic impact on inflation and energy prices in a generic ballot consistently showing Democrats with an advantage, this suggests the historical headwinds for Republicans are going to be very real in this cycle. And from the Silver Bulletin's Nate Silver, the generic ballot shows a meaningful Democratic advantage. Reuters and Ipsos actually has it at D+3, and Emerson College has it at D+11, with the Silver Bulletin average somewhere in between depending and waiting. And there's a bit of a key money signal here that's going to be really important is the Senate Leadership Fund. So the super PAC that's aligned with the Senate Majority Leader Tun, he actually announced a $342 million investment across 8 states to protect the majority of this. And of that, there are $236 million defending 5 Republican-held seats in Ohio, North Carolina, Maine, Iowa, and Alaska, and $106 million targeting 3 Democratic-held seats in Michigan, Georgia, and New Hampshire. And Texas is notably absent from these investments, which is a signal of just how uncomfortable Republicans are with their nominee over there. And the key Senate races are going to be really important to watch as well. So we're going to go race by race, and these will be the 8 states to watch. So we will have Maine right here. Maine, on this map, it says they have it as a safe Democrat, but however, some are saying that Maine could be a bit of a toss-up actually. So Republican incumbent Susan Collins, she is a 5-term senator, a 30-year incumbent, and one of the most independent-minded Republicans in the Senate. And let's just get a good photo up of her so we know exactly who we're looking at. This is Susan Collins, and she actually served on the Appropriations Committee, and she survived 2020 by 8.6 points, even as the state went for Biden. And on the other side of the aisle here, we have Graham Plattner. Now, Graham Plattner is a very interesting fellow. He is a 41-year-old Marine veteran, 4 combat tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. He's an oyster farmer from Maine's coast, and he actually won the Democratic primary with 77.7% on June 9th after Governor Janet Mills dropped out despite a cascade of personal controversies. And that's what makes it so interesting. He had a lot of very interesting personal controversies that made him, that honestly kind of shaked his campaign. And despite this, he won the Democratic primary with 77.7%. Some of these controversies include old Reddit posts containing inflammatory language, a tattoo resembling a Nazi secret police skull, which he says was a drunken mistake in Croatia and has since covered it, and revelations from his wife that he had sent explicit sexual texts to other women while married. And Collins has $10 million in campaign cash, Susan Collins, the Republican candidate, on $10 million of campaign cash on hand, while Plattner has energy, institutional progressive support. Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, and Chuck Schumer now have all fully backed Graham Plattner. And Susan Collins and her camp strategy over here is to make this entirely about Plattner's character. Republican allies have previewed after the primary, quote, the end for Graham Plattner. In Plattner's camp, this state wants change, and the personal stuff is noise. And a Marine vet with a progressive economic message is the right contrast against the longtime incumbent. And per CNN, quote, there is still very little evidence that Plattner's personal problems have actually hurt his campaign at all, really, end quote. And we can obviously see that, seeing as he actually won his primary with 77.7% despite all of this. And per the Cook Political Report, Maine is in fact a toss-up. And going over to another toss-up state, we have the state of Ohio. This is the Republican incumbent candidate, former lieutenant governor under popular moderate Republican governor Mike DeWine. This is John Houston. Appointed to the Senate seat when J.D. Vance became vice president, he was actually never elected to the Senate. He just got put there when J.D. Vance got elected as the vice president when Donald Trump got elected as the president back in 2024. And that's something that's going to be very interesting to see about there. And we have on the other side of the aisle, Sherrod Brown, a three-time former Ohio senator. He lost his re-election back in 2024 as Democrats' most significant candidate loss of the cycle. He is one of the most recognizable political names in the state's recent history. He's known for a fiercely independent pro-worker and blue-collar political identity. Now, Democrats will argue that Houston is, quote, untested because he was appointed and not elected. And Republicans counter to this is that he's been on the Ohio ballot as DeWine's running mate, and his name's going to have broad recognition. And Ohio has been hit particularly hard by tariff disruptions to its manufacturing sector and persistent economic anxiety. Brown's message is tailor-made for this environment, and this race is one of the Sabato's crystal ball that was recently upgraded from a lean Republican to a toss-up. So this is going to be a very important state to watch in November and in the days leading up to November. And over in North Carolina, we have it rated here as a lean Democrat state. We're looking right here. This is Roy Cooper. He is the Democrats' nominee, the former governor, term limited, and well-known, broadly popular across the state. He's consistently outperformed Democratic presidential candidates in North Carolina. And on the other side of the aisle, Republicans' nominee are actually still being determined. It's a very, very crowded primary. We can actually take a look at this here. North Carolina Republicans in a primary. And it's always very interesting to see when these primaries are very crowded. We've seen some of these things before. So we're looking at Michael Whatley, and Whatley's probably easily going to be one of the strongest candidates on here. He's a big name in North Carolina, and obviously we just have it's a bit crowded, but it's definitely not uncertain. And the Cook Political Report is going to rate North Carolina as a lean Democrat, as Cooper is one of Democrats' strongest general election candidates in the country, and he's running in an open seat environment without the incumbency disadvantage. And we're also looking at Alaska, which is a lean Republican. So we're going to look at the Republican candidate, who's also the incumbent, Dan Sullivan. He's a two-term senator who won his last race comfortably, and Trump carried Alaska by 13 points back in 2024. And on the other side of the aisle, we have Mary Peltola. She's a former congresswoman, first Alaska native to serve in Congress. She lost her House re-election bid in 2024 by less than 3 points in a state that Trump carried by 13, and she's trying to keep the race local, her slogan being, quote, fish, family, and freedom. Peltola is a remarkable candidate for this terrain, but Alaska is pretty red. The Senate Leadership Fund is actually putting in about $15 million to protect Dan Sullivan, the Republican candidate, and their primaries all the way in August on the 18th. Alaska used ranked choice voting, so this full picture is not going to be set yet. And per race to the White House, Alaska is potentially, quote, the majority maker. So whichever party wins here, it will be very likely to control the chamber, and that framing is going to tell you how close this overall map will be. And now, Texas is a very interesting state we can watch here. It's very newly competitive. So what should be a safe Republican seat has actually become one of the most fascinating races on this map because of who actually won the primary. So if we're looking at the Republican nominee, who is Ken Paxton, he is the Attorney General of Texas. He was impeached by his own party-controlled state legislature in 2023 on corruption, bribery, and abuse of office charges. He was acquitted in a Senate trial that many observers viewed as procedurally irregular. He has a documented history of extramarital affairs, and former Senate Majority Leader Tom Tillis has compared this ethical record to, quote, Jeffrey Dahmer suffering from an eating disorder, end quote. Paxton has actually defeated the incumbent Senator John Cornyn in the May 26 runoff after Trump endorsed Paxton. And this is one of the clearest examples of Trump putting heavily and personal loyalty over party electoral calculation. And Republicans have invested heavily into Cornyn to prevent exactly this. And now, on the other side, a bit of a trailblazer. His name is James Tallarico. He is the he is the Democratic nominee. He is 37 years old. He's a state representative. He's a former middle school teacher and a seminarian. He has raised enormous amounts of money and has national attention. So the question here is, can Tallarico turn Texas blue for the first time since 1998? Republicans are obviously going to say no, and Democrats are very optimistic on this than they've been in any cycle in decades. And tellingly, the SLF did not include Texas in its initial $342 million investment. They're not actually entirely sure what they're going to do with this race. And of course, the Cook Political Report will have Texas as a lean Republican, but the Paxton factor has made this very competitive in a way Cornyn never would have been. And going over to Georgia, we have Jon Ossoff. He is the Democratic incumbent. He is the youngest sitting U.S. Senator, and he won his seat in January 2021, runoff by 0.6 points. And he has been stockpiling money and running hard ever since this cycle actually began. And on the other side of the aisle, we have Mike Collins. This is the Republican candidate. He is Trump's pick, who won the June 16 runoff over former Tennessee football coach Derek Dooley, who was backed by Governor Brian Kemp. And Georgia trended red in 2024, but Ossoff is well-funded and has the incumbency advantage. And the Democratic environment nationally will favor him. And the Cook Political Report has upgraded this from a toss-up to a lean Democrat, and that is a very meaningful shift. And the SLF is still investing $44 million in Georgia, and they have not given up. But privately, some Republicans acknowledge that Michigan is now a more promising pickup target. And speaking of Michigan, it is a competitive and it is an open seat. So Gary Peters retired, which creates an open seat in a state Trump narrowly won back in 2024 by 1.4 points. And looking over here, we have another guy named Mike. His name is Mike Rogers. He is the Republican nominee, former congressman, expected to be the nominee. And in the Democratic primary, it's still contested between the epidemiologist Abdul Al-Sayed and the Congresswoman Haley Stevens and State Senator Mallory McMorrow, and it's a three-way progressive fight versus a moderate fight. And Michigan is the state Republicans now rate as their best pickup opportunity, having becoming slightly more optimistic in Michigan than in Georgia, per some of their private conversations cited by CNN. Now remember, guys, all of these sources are in the description, so if you're ever curious about the facts I mentioned here, they're always in the source and they're always in the description, so you can always check them out for yourself. And this is an open seat in a purple state where the Democratic primary result will matter enormously for general election strength. And now I want to talk about the House of Representatives. So the House of Representatives is going to be more closer than it actually looks. So the Senate is getting more attention, but the House math is even closer. It's razor thin, and Democrats are going to be the clear favorites here. So Republicans are going to currently hold about a narrow House majority in the 218 to 220 range. And Democrats are going to need a net gain of these 3 seats to flip the majority. And from the race to the White House, which correctly called House control in the last 3 cycles, rates Democrats as, quote, the clear favorite for the House, giving Republicans roughly a 27% chance of holding this majority. That being said, Republicans have made significant gains on the map in recent months through redistricting in Florida, Tennessee, and Virginia. Court decisions in April and May have shifted to several districts in Republicans' favor, moving GOP chances from roughly 19% to 27% in a matter of weeks. And per Cook's political report on the June 18th update, they moved Iowa's 2nd district, Michigan's 4th district, and North Carolina's 11th district from likely to lean Republican, which is slight favorable movement for the GOP. And Democrats' fundraising advantage is pretty enormous here. In almost every competitive House race, Democratic candidates have actually raised more money, and the generic ballot advantage remains the same, D+3 to D+11. In House elections, a D+5 or greater generic ballot environment typically produces a significant Democratic gain. And of course, we have to consider a lot of these controversies with some of these candidates, and that's a large factor in this whole math here. And the last thing to understand about this midterm map is the candidate quality question, and it's going to cut both ways. In CNN's June's analysis, they actually put it there quite well. The 2026 midterms may come down not only to national issues, but to which party actually nominated more problematic candidates in their key races. So on the Democratic side, we have Graham Plattner in Maine, who we obviously discussed, a candidate who has controversies that are real and documented, but running in a state that is older and more moderate than his progressive brand typically plays well in. And on the other side, Ken Paxton in Texas, who is a Republican, a candidate whose legal, ethical, and personal problems are so severe that even his own party super PAC hasn't invested in his own race, and whose impeachment by Republicans was cited as one of the one of the most consequential recent examples of intra-party accountability. And for historical context, Republicans have nominated underperforming candidates in key cycles before. Herschel Walker back in 22, Blake Masters and Kari Lake in Arizona, Mark Robinson in North Carolina in 24, and each of these candidates underperformed what a stronger candidate would have done. And CNN's bottom line on this is, quote, "It's possible these things simply matter less and less in this political age, and party affiliation matters much more, and this is going to be the question that 2026 is aiming to answer." And of course, the wild card that we have in these midterms is the Iran war. The midterms are always going to be shaped by economic conditions. The Iran war's impact on inflation, particularly gasoline prices, has been the defining economic stories of 2.9. So CPI inflation is at 4.2, but core CPI inflation is at 2.9. And if they can keep this, if they can get a deal going and get the deal to hold, and gas prices come down meaningfully by October, it'll give Republicans a domestic economic story to tell. And if the deal collapses or price stay elevated, or nothing happens with the deal, we kind of see this sort of same cycle of they're close to a deal, but it falls out, close to a deal, and it falls out, and things just hold steady at these elevated prices. This will give Democrats a run on the, quote, the war cost you money sort of deal. And less than 25% of Americans actually approve of Trump's management of cost of living issues per a June poll. And that number, more than any single Senate race, may determine the shape of November. And so that is the picture as of June 24th for the midterm elections here in 2026. November 4th, that is in 133 days. So keep all this in mind as you think about heading towards the ballot box. And it is very important that you head to the ballot box, because remember, guys, if you're not happy about the way your government's doing things, what you can do is go get your voice heard at that ballot box. So remember to vote, guys. And moving on to the rest of our stories for today. So the courts have cleared a nationwide expedited deportations sort of deal here. So a federal appeal has actually ruled today in the courts that the Trump administration can resume expedited removal of undocumented migrants through the entire United States and not just within 100 miles of the border as the previous policy limited. And just for a bit of context, expedited removal just means that deportation without a full immigration court hearing, which is a faster track process. And that ruling is a significant expansion of this enforcement authority, and the $70 billion immigration bill that passed back in Congress back on June 9th with no guardrails is now paired with a court ruling enabling nationwide fast-track deportations. And civil rights and immigration advocacy groups were already planning legal challenges as of this morning. And for context, the Trump administration has stated a goal of deporting 1 million people per year, and the current pace before this ruling was roughly 600,000 to 700,000 annualized. And today's ruling expands the geographic and procedural scope of this operation. And in a bit more of primary news, the New York primary, the Democratic divide in one election. New York held its congressional primary elections on Tuesday, and the results read as a test for the Democratic Party's direction. So New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani, himself a progressive who won the mayorship earlier this year, he backed 3 progressive candidates, including Claire Valdez in Brooklyn, and all 3 won. But, and here's the but, all 3 won in safe Democratic seats, districts where Democrats win comfortably regardless of who the nominee is. In the competitive swing states the Democrats need to hold or flip to keep the House, the moderates have prevailed. And from NPR's analysis, quote, New York's primary elections highlighted a question the Democratic Party is facing. Just how progressive does it want to be? In safe seats, progressive win, but in competitive seats, moderates prevail, end quote. And Mamdani is also facing his own controversy as he's been accused of anti-Semitism for his criticism of AIPAC, which he's defending publicly. And a bit of an update over in the Middle East and Iran. The missiles are off the table, the IAEA is coming, and the Hormuz hotline has been established. So a quick update, obviously, where the Iran talks are going to stand as of today. The Iranian president, his name is Pezeshkian, in Pakistan on Tuesday, quote, the discussion over armed missiles does not exist in the Memorandum of Understanding, and it never will, end quote. Iran's missile program is explicitly off the negotiating table. The administration has sought to include it, but Iran refused. And Trump on the IAEA inspectors pushed back on Iran's claims that no visit has been scheduled. Quote, they're wrong, they're wrong, they're wrong. They know they're wrong, end quote. There's a lot of mixed messaging between these two sides, and this timing will persist here. And on the Strait of Hormuz hotline, Iran and the United States has agreed to a direct telephone hotline to prevent misunderstandings in the waterway, confirmed by Iran's chief negotiator, Ghaly Baff. This is a meaningful operational step. A direct line means that incidents don't have to escalate before anybody talks. And the Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, is in the Persian Gulf visiting allies like the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, others. They're all trying to de-link Lebanon from these nuclear talks, and Iran keeps relinking them. The bottom line is that the deal is holding, technically. IAEA access, Hormuz hotline, and a 60-day roadmap are all real things, but Iran's missiles, Lebanon, and the Supreme Leader's public silence remain the unresolved pressure points here. And another important bit of news that happened this past week is that Alan Greenspan died at the age of 100. So the former Federal Reserve Chairman, Alan Greenspan, died on Monday at age 100. And Greenspan chaired the Federal Reserve from 1987 to 2006, nearly 2 decades, under 4 presidents, Reagan, George H.W. Bush, Clinton, and George W. Bush. In his tenure spanned the 1987 stock market crash, the dot-com bubble, 9/11, and the early stages of the housing bubble that preceded the 2008 financial crisis. And his approach, sometimes called, quote, the Greenspan put, was to keep rates low and be willing to cut aggressively in response to market downturns. That approach is credited with sustaining long growth periods and criticized for enabling the process that led to the 2008 crisis. In his famous line on irrational exuberance, warning of the, quote, irrational exuberance in the stock markets in the 1996 speech, it became one of the most quoted phrases in economic history. And his legacy is genuinely contested among economists, and the man who ran most of the most important financial institutions in the world for 19 years deserves honest accounting of both. All right, and that's all the news for today. As of midday on June 24th, Wednesday, we had 2 deep dives today. We went into POLYMARKET, a $9 billion company who's built its entire brand on being the most transparent and verifiable market in the world, and then ran a growth campaign on fake websites with undisclosed payments targeting users it is legally banned from serving. The contradiction is the story. Whether anyone with enforcement authority actually does anything, excuse me, is the follow-up. And then on the midterms, 133 days, Democrats need 4 Senate seats and 3 House seats. The generic ballot is favoring them. And the candidate quality question is going to be the wild card in Maine, Ohio, Texas, Georgia, Alaska, North Carolina. These 6 days are going to determine Senate control, so keep those in mind. And Alan Greenspan died at 100. He ran the Fed for 19 years, and now we have a new Fed chair making his first decisions right now. That context matters. And all of these sources that I have in these descriptions, all the sources that I use to get the information for these shows are always in this description. So if you're ever curious on where I get my information from or how I got to a certain point, all the sources are in the description. That's what I do. That's what we do here. And yeah, so thank you for everyone who came into the stream and watched today. And remember, guys, this is all for you to decide. That's what we do here. I just give you straight facts, and then you go ahead and decide what to do with them. My name is Elijah Ireta. I'm the editor-in-chief here at Saber News, and I hope we all have a wonderful Wednesday afternoon. If you like what you see, please leave a follow. I'm starting one of the greatest media revolutions in the world. And if you want to be part of it, leave a follow. And if you want to be informed, because being informed is very important, give us a follow. So like I said, I hope we all have a wonderful Wednesday afternoon, and I'll catch you back here. Maybe on Friday, I will be going on a trip to California. So we'll see what we do there. I'll probably have a video pre-recorded for you guys. And so yeah,